Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. In this episode, Kenji and I are going to be talking about expanding your relationships. And this is such an important topic, I think, especially for people who maybe like us, who I guess are in the midlife now. And that's, I think, technically what we're in. And I think in midlife, a lot of people have difficulty with expanding their relationships, maybe feel like their social circle is really shrinking, maybe kind of harken back to the times of residency or med school where you felt like you had a lot of really great friends, had deep relationships, but things have now shifted as you've had kids and as you've gotten more and more into the kind of going home and being with your nuclear family and not maybe spending as much time with your friends.
Yeah, and this has been studied. I was looking at some studies, and it says that your relationship peaks around age 40 to 50. And then from there, it gradually starts to shrink. And so this is really what we're talking about here is that as you get to these ages, maybe you're even noticing it at an earlier age because of various things going on in your life. You might find that you are experiencing this right now, even if you're not quite at that 40 or 50. But when you do get to that 40 or 50, I think a lot of us are going to start experiencing that decline. And that's really what was happening to us as well.
Yeah. And I think this is a really normal thing. So if you're sitting there right now and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that's me. I've felt the last few years that I've not really developed any new relationships, or the relationships that I used to have that were deep are maybe not as deep anymore. Just know it's normal. I see it a lot of times, and I'm a lot of members in the Facebook community of female physicians. And there's a lot of people talking about feeling lonely. So if that's you, it's completely normal. And what we're really going to focus on this podcast is helping you think about ways you can expand your relationships and also understanding why it's so important to continue to do so, so that you're not in a situation in your 50s, 60s, 70s where you are truly isolated. And I think back to my grandmother actually in her 70s and even late 60s was just spending all her time sitting, on her couch watching TV and just felt like she didn't have a lot of people to spend time with. And so that's really what we're aiming to avoid. And if you're a person who wants to avoid that too, then this is a really important podcast.
And even before starting semi-retired MD, for us, we were experiencing that trend of shrinking relationships. I'd say that our circles were probably staying about the same, and there were some relationships also where, especially if there's a lot of distance between us, those relationships were were maybe fading, and at least at the very least, they were staying about the same level of depth. And right now, what I would say is that, and it's changed significantly since we started semi-retired MD, and we'll talk about some of the things that we've done, is that our relationship circles are expanding significantly. And not only that, the quality of the relationships are getting so much deeper.
And I want to give all of you a little bit of context too, to understand when Kenji says that, what it really means, because we travel about 6 months a year. Our kids are homeschooled. And so a lot of, and we're moving all the time, right? We've moved, I think, 10 times since we got together. And so we don't have that kind of consistency of having been in a neighborhood or getting to be friends with our kids' friends or, seeing somebody at soccer practice every week. Like we don't have that. And yet despite that, we continue to grow our relationship pool. And so, for those of you who are there and have a neighborhood and have a system where your kids go to school, you're going to also have the leg up. And so if you put into place some of the things we're going to talk about, you're going to be all set.
Yeah, and I also wanted to talk about the other point, which is not just expanding your circles, but the depth of those relationships. And so, when we think about some of the friendship circles, we think about the time that we spend with them. We're not sitting there talking about, the kids or the weather or
or curtains,
that's right,
carpets, which
right.
is always one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, the conversations we have, we're really going deep. We're really understanding, like, what are some of our fears? What are some of our aspirations? What are some of our dreams? And so it's a completely different level. We're really going deep and really understanding the person at the core. And that is extremely rewarding because it just doesn't feel superficial. It feels like you're really getting to know them. And they're also really understanding who you are as a person. And that's very, very fulfilling. It gives you that feeling of joy and happiness and fulfillment because somebody understands you really well, and you're doing the same for somebody else when you understand them at that level of depth.
Yeah, I think there's a danger, when you have smaller kids or you have kids, who are in their teenage years of really losing yourself as an individual, and your friends become, the parents of your kids' friends, and all you're talking about is the kids. And your friends don't really know who you are and know that kind of depth. You don't have that depth of connection as a person because your focus is on the kids. And so I think that's also a really important thing to highlight of what Kenji just said, which is when we're forming relationships, actually people are getting to know us, not just about our kids, not just about, our travel lifestyle, but they're actually getting to know us and who we are at a great depth. And that takes some effort, that takes some intentionality. And it's also putting yourself in a situation where the people around you are willing to be vulnerable and to be who they really are and not feel like they have to hide things, not feel like they have to put up a facade. And that's just about, finding the right people, but creating the right situations that they can be real.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing that we see is that a lot of couples have such an intense focus on their kids. They put their kids number one, they prioritize, they focus on them, they focus on their education. And I recently I got a text from a friend who was sharing with me that his second kid, and they have two kids, and so they're going to be empty nesters soon because the second kid is about to go to college. And so he was sharing that with me, and I was just asking, hey, what are you going to do? And there was this real kind of uncertainty about what they were going to do. They said, yeah, maybe we'll get a camper van, we'll travel around the country. But it just didn't have this feeling of real fulfillment because, again, their focus has been on the kids. Now the kids are out of the house, they're empty nesters. The question is, now what? Right. And so really first thing I did and I thought about this episode. First thing I did was, hey, think about relationships, right? Think about building and expanding your relationship circles, because it's really, really meaningful, and really kind of gets to the point of this episode, which is, why do relationships matter? Why are we even talking about this? And this really comes from a study that we were exposed to recently. It's a study from Harvard, and it is the longest running study. It's been going on for 85 years, and it continues. They're on their fourth principal investigator, and the study is called the Study of Adult Development, and it's a study that looked at 2,000 families and looked at them longitudinally. And so they've looked at the original participants, their kids, and their kids, right? So their grandkids, right? And so it's been a really it's an amazing study. And one of the key findings from it was that the quality of your relationships is the single most important factor in determining your health, happiness, and longevity.
Yeah, and this is relationships, of course, with your kids. So they're not saying that kids are not important, but it's a relationship with your significant other. It's a relationship with other family members. It's relationships with your friends. And again, why we really wanted to focus on friends for this episode is because they are really, really important. I think a lot of us do tend to have less and less friends, make less and less new friends as we age, and to feel lonely. And when you feel lonely, it's not going to help your health, right? It's not going to help your longevity. When you look at the blue zones and you look at I don't know if any of you have seen the Netflix series on the blue zones, almost consistently, I think all of them, it's community and how important it is, and people getting together regularly with their community that is part of what contributes to that longevity. So, what we wanted to mention is we really see relationships as a muscle, and that it's a muscle that you want to continuously work and continue to build. So, this is not without effort. One thing that I've come to realize the last few years, which I did not know, 10 years ago, is that one of my superpowers is dinner parties. And it may sound trite, it may sound unimportant, but hosting dinner parties and allowing gatherings, creating gathering spaces for people to come together to meet new people. So when we do dinner parties, I regularly invite 4, 5, 6 couples and their families, so they can get quite huge. And it's really about introducing new people to each other and allowing them to have those relationships. And we're fostering those relationships not only for ourselves, but for other people. And that makes such a difference. And so it's a lot of effort. I'm cooking, or the cleanup. It's not grocery shopping is not a joke, right? And of course, I could make it easier by hiring a chef. But for part of what I want to do is serve them our food and to put the work in myself of really taking care of them as a host. And so when I host these dinner parties, it really is a gathering for people. And this forms that deep relationship where you eat together, your kids play together, and you spend some time together with some regularity. And so when we're in Puerto Rico, we're constantly doing that, is gathering people, bringing them together. And I can't tell you how many times I've said to people in our community, in our semi-retired MD community, go host a meetup yourself. We have this huge community. You're waiting on somebody else to get people together. Why don't you be the individual who says, in Empire Builders, hey guys, I want to get people together in this area. Let's meet up here and start to be the person who gathers people.
Yeah, and I think that analogy with the muscle is really great because as we age, many of you guys know that you lose that muscle mass, right? And you have to really work hard just to maintain them, let alone building them, right? You have to really work on it. And again, same thing with relationships. It's so much easier to just sit on the couch and watch Netflix, right? But it really requires that intention to want to build and expand your relationships, and that investment in time, the investment in the effort, to create these connections and then to foster them, is really, really important. And one thing I wanted to kind of add is that while it's great to have dinner parties and things like that, one thing that we've really noticed is that if you can spend, and this is not from us, this is actually one of our mentors mentioned this to us, if you can spend more than 24 hours straight with them. So like spend a few days with them, just the two of you or the group of you, with a group of friends, and not just like a few hours at dinner, but actually spend several days with each other. Then that really, what we found is that really heightens the experience and really deepens that relationship, because again, you get past that initial kind of like, hey, how you doing, like what's going on with the kids, and you kind of get into some of those deeper conversations and really form those deeper connections. And so something that that we intentionally have been doing is spending several days with some of our friends, maybe renting an Airbnb and spending a whole weekend with them, are some of the things that we've been doing.
Yeah, and this really takes the support of your spouse, I will say. But one of the things that we do now is we take a couple of weekends a year, each of us individually, to go spend time with our friends. And the other individual, has the home for taken care of. And when we're with our friends, the guys, they're all doing workout activities generally, and Spartan races. And this year they're going to do 29029. And us ladies, a lot of us are going and doing things like going to Miraval, or we're going to more like energy and meditation retreats and things like that. So just depends on who you're getting together with and what kind of activities you're going to do. But I really think, like Kenji said, there's a value of making the space for you individually to get away, just even for 1 or 2 nights a year with your friends, your deepest friends, to go deeper and to be ideally in like an Airbnb, not a hotel, because in a hotel, you're not spending as much time together. But if you're in an Airbnb, you're eating 3 meals a day together, you're maybe doing some activities together. It's a totally different experience that builds those memories, right? A lot of us have memories from when we were in residency and we spent 36 hours with our residency friends. And we spent all weekend with them. And, you still have that relationship because you have that memory back then, but why not build that memory, a new updated memory now? Like, why don't you have memories from, that span 20, 30 years instead of just kind of going back to that old memory as the last time you really had a great time and spent some quality time together.
Yeah, and so again, what we're talking about here is not just the quantity of relationships, but really the quality of them. And as we said, we talked about a number of ways that you can spend time with them, short term, like at dinner parties, but also we talked about getting together, renting an Airbnb. But I think another really important one for us has been going to conferences, right? And so we will go to conferences, and there's one conference that we go to that lasts 6 days, and so it's a pretty intense intense one where we're spending time, Leti and I, together, but also with a group of friends. And that's been one of the best experiences, because when you have that type of time, amount of time and time to spend with each other, it's a really amazing experience.
And it's not just time, it's seeing the same group of people over and over again. So you're building those relationships deeper every single time. But it's also going to these conferences that have transformational growth. I think that's one of the keys. So, for example, we're hosting the Prosperity Conference this year. And what we're looking for is to create transformation in people's lives. We're looking for them to come in and get tools and skills and knowledge about health, wealth, and relationships that they can actually apply and then transform their lives to live more of a life that they love, because that's what our whole premise of our company is to help all of you create lives you love and live them. And that kind of transformational spaces where you go in and you're really open and you're saying, what do I really want in my life? Is my health really where I want it to be? What am I going to do to change this? And actually coming out with actions and activities. Not only is the accountability of having that community around you afterwards going to help with that, but just being in that transformation where you're really open and you're thinking about who you are and what you want your next decade to be about, and who you actually want to be, and actually creating it in the moment. When you're around another group of people doing that, who are also open, who are also having those deeper conversations, who are also thinking about what's truly important to them and what they want to create in their future, that leaves this special space that allows for a deepening that happens in such a dramatic fashion in such a short time, compared to, hey, let's just sit around and drink some beers by the fire. It's just a totally different experience. And so I think going to transformational conferences, which ideally are a business write-off, right? Because you've got your real estate business or you've got another business. Not only are you having a real estate write-off, but it's actually a very personal growth situation, and you're deepening friendships. It's like the best pieces of all the world together at once.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, of course, there's going to be some amazing topics at the conference, but it really is intentional on our part to create a space where people can build those connections and relationships. What we're doing is we're bringing together an incredible group of people, very like-minded, growth mindset oriented. It's not like going to a medical conference where, it's just a mix of people that don't necessarily have, common goals or aspirations or dreams or even mindset. This is a group, and we know a lot of them who are already coming, and we're very excited about it. It's just such an incredible group. And so if you're listening to this and you want to be part of something like this, this is a group that you want to be part of. It's just such an incredible group. And it's the type of group where and this is the group that we have expanded our relationships into, because it's such a great group. And this is the type of group that I think you as our listener will also enjoy being around.
Yeah, this reminds me of a couple of years. Well, we've been doing this program called Boundless Life the last few years. And I think some of you guys have heard about it, where we go and for a month in the summer, we're in a place, oftentimes it's Greece. It's going to be different this year, where we're around all these entrepreneurial families and we spend a month kind of slow traveling. Kids are in school. We're all having leisurely breakfast, talking about business and doing activities. It's a really fun way to spend the month. It's like adult day camp is really what it is. But I can't tell you how shocked I was the first time we went, and everybody stood up and did their introductions, and all their introductions were, I used to travel. I used to have a really full life, and, I feel isolated and I'm not traveling anymore now that I have kids. And I don't feel like I have a community. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to have a community. And when we were able to stand up, we said, we actually created our own community. And, we've got the semi-retired MD community. We've got, the community from all the masterminds that we do. And we have our business friends. We have so many different communities, but we created them. You can create your own communities. Like, I just want to reinforce that. And this is where it starts. It starts with dinner parties. It starts with going to conferences. It starts with just making phone calls, getting people together, for one weekend a year. Like, those types of things will create a depth of relationships. And you are in charge of all of this. You can absolutely create your own communities. Do not feel like you're a victim or you're passive or you're helpless. It's actually all in your control.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, just as a real practical tip, as you are thinking about this and maybe you're taking some first steps on expanding some of your relationships, is really pay attention to the state and your energy. And what I mean by this is, like, how do you show up every day? Are you showing up as a type of person that you would want to be around, right? And, just as a couple of examples, there are suffering states and beautiful states. Suffering states are, when you are anxious or stressed, fearful, angry, and when you're in these types of states, these are not states that attract people, right? And if you just and you can think about it yourself, when you're thinking about who you want to be around, if you're, do you really want to be around somebody who is in a suffering state? Or you can actually choose to be more in a beautiful state, which is somebody who is grateful, somebody who is happy, joyful, confident, excited, right? Has a lot of
And
energy, right?
curious and actually asking the other person questions and wanting to really understand them deeply and not just thinking about how you're going to respond to their thing, but actually being a generous, we go to a lot of relationship talks, like in terms of intimate relationships, and they say, be a generous lover. Well, this is being a generous friend who really comes with curiosity and a really deep care and of wanting to understand the other individual and asking them questions. That is also a beautiful state.
And when you embrace this beautiful state, what you'll find, and we've seen this countless times in our lives, but we've also seen it in our community, when you embrace the beautiful state, you will attract people. People will come to you, and that really is one of the keys to really expanding your network. I think it's been one of the keys for us to be able to expand our network.
So just kind of summarizing some of the things we've talked about, make sure you're searching for groups of like-minded people who have very similar interests. Ideally, they really want to grow. Put yourself in transformational spaces like conferences or other places you're going to learn. Host dinner parties, pull people together for weekends away so you can really go deeper. Take that time, set that time aside to create the deepening of relationships, which means for all of you who, listen to a lot of our other podcasts, means you're putting it in your schedule, in your calendar, right? Because it's actually a priority. So you're not going to just accidentally have it happen. You're actually going to make the space for it and bring the best version of yourself to those situations so that you can open people up. They're more likely to be vulnerable. They're really, telling you who they are, and you can go deep and you can form those relationships that last a lifetime. So when you're 60 and 70, you are not sitting on the couch watching TV by yourself, and that's not how you spend all day. So if you needed a little bit of pain thrown in there, that's what we're trying to avoid. Okay, well, this is our phenomenal episode, I think, on on creating relationships, expanding your relationships, and how important it is. And we gave you some tips on how to do that. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend and subscribe to the Doctors Building Wealth podcast and attend the Prosperity Conference. We're really excited about bringing such a phenomenal community together yet again for the conference and watching all of your transformations and then watching you form those deep relationships that are going to be there 5, 10, 15 years from now. So you're not sitting on the couch. Okay. See you in the next episode.